Hello, this is Richard Thornton. Welcome to part 2 of our series on the Miccosukee people of Florida. It's an interesting story that few people know about and is generally left out of the history books. What did their ancestors look like? The Olmecs had nothing to do with the Olmec civilization. That's something that most references don't tell you. The Zoque, Itcha, and Mixtec art portrayed a multi-ethnic civilization. There was not just one people that composed the Olmec civilization. Here you see some of the many distinct physical types that can be found in the so-called Olmec art. Henceforth in this program we'll call them Zoque. Zoque, Itcha, and Mixtec art portrayed a multi-ethnic civilization. You see here again. Notice this gentleman here. He has long hair, a flowing mustache, and a long beard. This man looks like a typical Oriental or perhaps Native American. This man looks more Polynesian. This man has a silly grin on his face, but probably you would say he was some type of American Indian features. One of the ethnic groups had oversized skulls. This is not mentioned in most of the references on the Olmec civilization, but there was clearly a distinctive type of elite at the Olmec civilization that did not have normal human skulls. Here you see there? That's not normal. This is a baby of that type of ethnic group. Now we see this also in South America in the Parasca civilization. Here is a Olmec statue. Notice the shape of the skull. All right, this is a baby and a juvenile Parasca skull, also known as Homo sapien parascusa, from Peru. The brilliant forensic artist Marcia K. Moore has recently created a 3D model of what a hybrid Parasca skull person would look like. And as you notice, virtually identical to the portrayal of the Olmec elite. Look at there. See the shape of the head? Identical in every detail. Only trouble is the bottle-headed Paracas people were in southern Mexico at least 400 years before they were in Peru, so they couldn't have gone from Peru to Mexico. Their DNA has been traced to the region north and east of the Black Sea in the Ukraine and Russia. Their ancestors were not American Indians. They were a unique ethnic group, perhaps a sub-race of mankind. This is the most popular image of the Olmec civilization, but really is not representative of the majority of people. But you can see those people still live here today. Here's an Olmec head, here's an Olmec wrestler, and here's Kelly Harjo, a very prominent member of the Creek tribe, who is an administrator with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and also a member of Tlatelolco tribal town. On the left, you see a Zoque TV reporter in Mexico. On the right, you see Blaise Osceola, a reporter and spokesman for Miccosukee TV in Florida. They could be cousins. Oh, well, they could be sisters. They could be twin sisters. Notice the similarity. They obviously both have very similar ethnic backgrounds. Here we see an elderly Zoque lady in Mexico. This is a photograph from the early 20th century on the right of an elderly Miccosukee lady. They have different physical features than the two young ladies in the earlier slide, but you can see that these two women had very similar ethnic backgrounds. They were one of the other peoples who made up the Olmec civilization. Is there similarity of architecture? Let's see. But there's no archaeological excavations been carried out in the Zoque River Valley in Georgia. But we think they probably built Maya Creek style houses. We know that their pottery was very similar to other branches of the creeks. This is Zoque town in Amy's Creek Valley of Habersham County, which is currently being discovered by volunteers from the Appalachian Research Foundation. So far, we've found no evidence that the houses were any different in the valley than those of similar creek towns over in the Miccosukee Valley, which is about 3 miles to the west of there. In 1886, Smithsonian archaeologist Cyrus Thomas visited several archaeological sites in the Zoque Miccosukee homeland. This is northeast Georgia. In 1939, WPA archaeologist Robert Washop visited several of the sites discovered by Thomas. They included stone ruins, earthworks, mounds, and petroglyphs. These ancient sites were soon forgotten. Using ERSI satellite imagery, LIDAR, and hoofing it, people of One Fire volunteers are finding many more archaeological sites in the verdant valleys of the Zoque and upper Chattahoochee River basins. Especially intriguing are the large Mesoamerican style ball courts. Horseshoe-shaped earthen ball courts were a key feature of Zoque, Icha, and Yucatec towns in Tabasco, Chiapas, and southern Mexico. It was a different cultural tradition than the much smaller stone ball courts seen in classic Maya cities. Perhaps the rules of the game was a little different. I might add that most of the ball courts we're finding in northeast Georgia are the size of an American football field. Obviously, there's a little bit different game being played. Perhaps it's more like lacrosse. Smithsonian Institute archaeologist Cyrus Thomas in 1886 and WP archaeologist Robert Washington in 1939 found several horseshoes shaped in the Zoque-Batesville area, but didn't know what they were, so the discoveries were forgotten. Now, in the case of Robert Washington, he did assign official site numbers, which are in the Georgia Archaeological Site Inventory. However, they've been completely forgotten. Even though they're listed, most of the archaeologists don't even know where these sites are. And in one case, a large ball court in the village of Saltee was partially damaged, first by widening of a highway, and then most recently by re-landscaping around the Saltee-Nacoochee Community Center. This is a site that's discovered in 2019 by the Appalachian Research Foundation. We first noticed it on satellite imagery. Here you see the shape of the court. Very visible on a sloping pasture. Then we went down to ground level, and by golly, this site was in almost perfect condition. You could still see the earth berms that were used as the seats for the spectators. The playing field was flat. You could play a football game on it today. And in the north terrace, which is higher, probably is where the dignitaries sat. Nearby was a ceremonial pond, somewhat filled with sediment today, but in a shape typical of the art of Olmec. You see the sun, that's something like a stylized flower. Possibly the dirt was dug out here to make the earth berms for the ball court, or on the other hand, it could have been a natural feature of the land 1,000 years ago. The ball court here is 145 feet north-south and 315 feet east-west. Interesting enough, here is another feature book of the same 315 feet, but it's a mound. Discovered in the first week of April 2019. It is actually one of the largest mounds in the southeast in area coverage. It is the size of a football field. It is also 315 feet long. It's 165 feet wide, which would be the width of the total width of a ball court, by the way, including the stands. Right now, the highest point is about 25, 28 feet right here. However, we learned that about 20 years ago, Habersham County government scooped off about 15 feet off the top in order to make field for road construction. This is the location of that mound. It's called the Arnold Mound. Spectacular site, surrounded on all sides by mountains. The study team originally went to Alec Mountain Stone Circle, which was found by Cyrus Thomas and then measured by Arthur Kelly, the famous archaeologist from the University of Georgia, in the 1950s, and then promptly forgotten. That will be a subject of another one of our programs, but it obviously has a key role in the overall layout of this large town. We used GPS surveying equipment to get the exact locations of the mounds and earth features, and then when I mapped them out back on my computer, I was astonished to find that the entire town was laid out very precisely in mathematical relationships, in which the angles of these center points of these mounds describe the various positions of the sun throughout the year at the sunset and sunrise, creating an equilateral triangle and an isosceles triangle. Here you see some terraces. This is probably a man-made earthwork. This is the ball court, and this is a small mound on the top of the ridge above the ball court. The other mounds up here are not very large. The Amos Creek Mound is a conical burial mound approximately 175 feet in diameter. It's a very large burial mound. This is the probable appearance of a 18th century Zoque on the Zoque River near present-day Clarksville, Georgia. This would have been during a period of time where the surviving Zoque who stayed in northeast Georgia, and there weren't very many of them, became under the control of the Cherokee tribe. They were not ethnic Cherokees. They were Mesoamericans, but they were in territory that had been given to the Cherokees in the Treaty of 1785. We know that they lived in log houses. We also know that when their land was sold to the United States in 1818, most of these Zoque went to Florida and joined the Seminoles. They did not consider themselves Cherokees. Some of the Zoque living in North Carolina cast their fate with the Cherokee tribe, and their descendants live today near Robbinsville, North Carolina, the far western end of the state. Let's compare the Miccosukee today with their relatives in southern Mexico. This is a Miccosukee craftsman, a recent photograph. It is interesting that the Miccosukee much more resemble, let's put it a reverse way. Let's say the Creek descendants in eastern Georgia strongly resemble the Miccosukee. They do not look like Muskogee Creeks as a general rule. Now, western Georgia, they do look more like Muskogee Creeks. So this gentleman here could easily be one of my cousins. In fact, he's not terribly different than what I looked when I was young. So it's very obvious that the Miccosukee are closely related to the eastern Creeks that you find in the eastern half of Georgia and in South Carolina. We're obviously first or second cousins, let's say, ethnically. Okay, here's a Zoque village on a river in the Tabasco lowlands. This is an old picture of a Miccosukee village in the Everglades. Do we see some similarities there? Not a whole lot of difference. This is a Zoque Chiki. They use the same word as we do in the Creek language. In the Tabasco lowlands, it's an open-sided shed, perhaps on one side. See the vertical river cane here? That's a common feature on archaeological sites in Georgia. Those were summer houses in which they functioned pretty much like a screen porch in that the air could come through the canes, but it provided shade. All right, we take a look at this family. And they're Chiki. Now here's a Miccosukee Chiki in the Florida Everglades. The people look very similar. The house is very similar. Not a whole lot of difference. Let's compare the traditional Zoque and Miccosukee religion? Are there any similarities or are they entirely different? This information comes from Dr. Lorena Reyes Gomez, who is a sociologist specializing in regional studies at the Universidad Autónoma de Chiapas, Instituto de Estudios Indígenas. I want to emphasize that because I do not consider myself an expert on the ethnology of the Zoques. The ancient religion of the Zoques is animistic. The Zoque believe in a constellation of gods, all of them alive, often young, exalted, who never die and are extremely powerful. Depending on the human behavior observed in earthly life, deities can provide rewards or punishments. They usually appear in pairs, either a male and female or good god and bad god. Commoners rarely kept figurines of deities, and that's even true today for those who practice the old religion in secret. The Zoque believed that the gods spoke to men from high atop lofty mountains. Another aspect of the Zoque worldview was the conception of the tona or tonali, companion animal or alter ego. The Zoque believed that both the companion animal or alter ego and the person are interdependent. The companion animal took on human traits such as speech, intuition, laziness, etc. The human and his animals take care of each other and both run parallel lives. In Zoque religion, an individual could have up to 13 guardian angels or companion animals. Now, this sounds very much like many of the beliefs of Native Americans in the United States. You talk about the spirit animal. So this seems to be a belief that could be common with many American Indian cultures today and in the past. This information comes from a school teacher, J.E. Lazelle, who was introduced to the real history and culture of the future Miccosukee in 1911 by Miko Jim Gopher. At that time, the word Miccosukee was unknown to most whites and probably was not commonly used by the Seminoles. This band of the Seminole called themselves Mayas. I've mentioned that in our first part of our series, but that's a very important point. They called themselves Mayas. It was only in the 1950s that they took the name Miccosukee. Unlike most branches of the Creeks who are monotheistic, the Miccosukee originally had many gods and spirits, although by 1911 the names of many of these had been forgotten. Still remembered the two creator gods, Tochi-Pa, the good god, and Hoki-Mantu, the bad god. The Miccosukee believed that God spoke to men from atop high, lofty mountains, or if the landmass was level, the gods would speak from atop available hills or man-made mounds. This is a story from Mr. Lazelle that was published in the Palm Beach Post in 1917. While walking about an uninhabited earth, Tochi-Pa suggested that they create animals to occupy the landscape. So he created pairs of male and female animals. The first animals could talk. After humans were created, the first animals taught them how to hunt, build shelters, and pick edible foods. Not a whole lot of difference. Even after 700 years of separation, there are many cultural traits held in common by the Zoque people of Mexico and the Miccosukee of Florida. This ends part 2 of our series on the Miccosukee. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on part 3, where we relate some of the Miccosukee tales they brought from Mexico.